Bhagavad-gita, Chapter 3, Text 10. Sahayagna prajashrishtva purovacha prajapati anenya prasavishyadvam Eshavos istakamaduk Sahayagna Prajashrishtva Purovacha Prajapati Anenya Prasavishyadvam Eshavos istakamaduk. And we can't chant. Can devotees chant the verse here or no?
Usually we don't, but it's up to you, Prabhu.
Anybody like to have a go? You're welcome to. No takers? Okay. All right, word for word. Saha, along with. Jagya, sacrifices. Prajaha, generations. Srishtva, creating. Pura, anciently. Uvacha, said. Prajapati, the Lord of creatures. Anena, by this. Prasavishyadvam, be more and more prosperous. Esha, this, va, your, astu, let it be, ista, all desirable things, kamadu, bestower. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. In the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu, and blessed them by saying, be thou happy by this jagya, sacrifice, because his performance will bestow upon you everything desirable for living happily and achieving liberation. Okay, so before we read the purport, I'd like to raise the question. It's saying, in the beginning of creation, the Lord of all creatures sent forth generations of men and demigods, along with sacrifices for Vishnu. So who is the Lord of all creatures? If it's Brahma, that would make sense because he's arranging something, sacrifice Vishnu. If it's Vishnu, it seems a little bit strange because why is Vishnu sending forth men and demigods? And it's for himself. It's kind of along with sacrifices for Vishnu. Anyway, reading on. We're going to get the answer here in the purport. Prabhupada says, the material creation by the Lord of creatures, in parentheses, Vishnu, there's the answer, it is Vishnu, is a chance offered to the conditioned souls to come back home, back to Godhead. All living entities within the material creation are conditioned by material nature because of their forgetfulness of the relationship to Vishnu, or Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Vedic principles are to help us understand that this eternal relation, as it is stated in the Bhagavad-gita, the Vedic principles are to help us understand this eternal relation, as it is stated in the Bhagavad-gita. The Lord says that the purpose of the Vedas is to understand Him. In the Vedic hymns, it is said, Patim Vishvashyat Neshvaram. Therefore, the Lord of the living entities is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, also, 2nd Canto, 4th Chapter, Text 20, Srila Sukadeva Goswami describes the Lord as Pati in so many ways. Pati means Lord. Shriya Patir, Jagya Pati, Prajapatir, Diyam Patir, Loka Patir, Dara Pati, Patir Gatis Chandaka, Vrishni Satvatam, Prasidatam Me Bhagavan Satam Pati. The Prajapati is Lord Vishnu, and he is the Lord of all living creatures, all worlds, all beauties, and the protector of everyone. The Lord created this material world to enable the conditioned souls to learn how to perform jagyas, sacrifices, for the satisfaction of Vishnu. so that while in the material world, they can live very comfortably without anxiety, and after finishing the present material body, they can enter into the kingdom of God. That is the whole program for the conditioned soul. By performance of yajna, the conditioned souls gradually become Krishna conscious and become godly in all respects. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtan yajna, the chanting of the holy names of God, is recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Caitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan yajna and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna in his devotional form, as Lord Caitanya, is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 5th chapter, text 32, as follows, with special reference to the Sankirtan yajna. Krishna Varnam Susa Krishnam Sango Pangascha Parshadam Jagnai Sankirtana Prayar Vijantihi Sumedasa. In this age of Kali, people who are endowed with sufficient intelligence will worship the Lord, who is accompanied by his associates by performance of Sankirtan yajna, end quote. Other yajnas prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but Sankirtan yajna is easy and sublime for all purposes, as recommended in the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 9, text 14. Om Ganatamanam Dasha Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitamena Bhutle Swayamupakaramayam Darati Swaparantam. So this material creation is an opportunity for the conditioned souls to rehabilitate themselves. And what is it that we need to rehabilitate ourselves from? Well, from the misconception, from the incorrect idea of that we are the supreme enjoyers. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 29, text 83, in the purport, Prabhupada says, when the spirit soul wants to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is put into this dreamland of material creation. So we're in the dreamland of material creation because we wanted to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, one might ask the question, what's wrong? Why is it wrong to want to imitate the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And somebody might even, a devotee even might raise the point. They might say, well, wait a second, I read someplace else where Prabhupada said imitation was a good thing. In the Nectar of Instruction, in the purport to text number 7, Prabhupada says, we are sending Sankirtan parties all over the world, and they are experiencing that even in the remotest part of the world, where there is no knowledge of Krishna, the Hare Krishna mantra, Mahamantra, attracts thousands of men to our camp. In some areas, people begin to imitate the devotees by shaving their heads and chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Only a few days after hearing the mantra. And here it comes. Prabhupada says, this may be imitative, but imitation of a good thing is desired. Some imitators gradually become interested in being initiated by the spiritual master and offer themselves for initiation. So what's wrong with wanting to imitate Krishna? I mean, the dictionary definition of imitate is to take or follow as a model. So what's wrong with that? Well, the imitation that's being spoken about here in the purport I quoted from the 4th canto, chapter 29, text 83 in the purport, that's imitation with something added to it. Or it's meant to be understood in a certain way. This is just like, I'll give you an example. With competition, Prabhupada said he liked competition. On one occasion, there was, they were walking and, with some of his sannyasi disciples said, I like this competition, referring to the competition about book distribution. But in saying that, Prabhupada wasn't saying that he liked cutthroat competition. In other words, there's healthy competition and there's unhealthy competition. There's healthy ambition and there's unhealthy ambition. And so somebody might think, well, isn't ambition to be ambitious always bad? No. Prabhupada says in a room conversation in 1977 in Mayapur, Prabhupada said, ambitious, hang on, there it goes. Ambitious for Krishna. Everyone should be ambitious, how I shall become a great devotee. You see? So ambition isn't necessarily bad. I mean, ambition to be Krishna, that's bad. But ambitious to become a great devotee, Prabhupada himself is saying in that everyone should be ambitious, how I shall become a great devotee. So ambition is not necessarily a bad thing. Just like competition is not necessarily a bad thing. Prabhupada liked the competition for book distribution, but that's not saying you like cutthroat competition, competing when it's unethical, detrimental to the welfare of the people involved, etc. So in the same way, imitation isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just like we just mentioned, there's healthy competition, there's unhealthy competition, there's healthy ambition, there's or incorrect ambition. So in the same way, to imitate, to elevate oneself to a higher, to be the best edition of oneself, okay, that's good. But to imitate with the ulterior motive of usurping the position of the person who you're imitating, that's a bad thing. And that's the imitation that's being referred to here. When Prabhupada talks about how the conditioned soul or the spirit soul is wanting to imitate Krishna, he's referring to imitation with that mixed into it. Okay, that is a bad thing, an undesirable thing. And I'll give you, just to elaborate upon that, to help give for some further insight, to offer some further insight into what I'm talking about here. I'm going to refer to a purport, a text in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 4, Text 26, where it's not actually talking directly about imitation, but it's addressing this point of more of usurping the honor and the respect that's due to one's superior, which ties right in with this whole idea of imitation with the intention to usurp the position of. So this is from the section of the Bhagavatam, where Vidura approaches Uddhava and wants him to become his spiritual master. And Uddhava declines because Vidura, for two reasons basically. One was that Maitreya Muni, who was present nearby, and Maitreya Muni was senior to Uddhava in age, and that's a consideration. There are different considerations as to what seniority is, but certainly one of them is age. And another is spiritual advancement, but in his humility, of course, Uddhava would not have considered himself more spiritually advanced than Maitreya. So he declined, and he directed Vidura, who was also old enough to be Uddhava's father. That's another reason why Uddhava declined, because Vidura was old enough to be his father, and there was Maitreya Muni was present nearby, who was also old enough to be his father and was also a very elevated devotee. So he referred Vidura, he directed Vidura, please, you take initiation from Maitreya Muni. He's, that's more appropriate. He's more qualified than they said, whatever he said, exactly. But anyway, so here's this, here's what he said. In this verse, text number 26, is Uddhava speaking, and Uddhava said, you may take lessons from the great learned sage Maitreya, who is nearby and who is worshipable for reception of transcendental knowledge. He was directly instructed by the personality of Godhead while he was about to quit this mortal world. Purport. Although one may be well versed in the transcendental science, one should be careful about the offense of Maryada Vyatikrama, or impertinently surpassing a greater personality. Of course, this is talking about in terms of devotees, but I think you could make an analogy. This is part of the way we got ourselves in trouble even originally in the spiritual world. We're trying to impertinently surpass a greater personality. In that case, it's Krishna. Here it's another devotee. According to scriptural injunction, one should be very careful of transgressing the law of Maryada Vyatikrama. Maryada means boundary, and Vyata means surpassing, Krama means steps. So stepping over the boundary is the literal translation of that phrase, Maryada Vyatikrama. So one should be very careful about transgressing that law of Maryada Vyatikrama, because by doing so, one loses his duration of life. It's like, this is serious business. One loses his duration of life, his opulence, fame, and piety, and the blessings of all the world. Woo! That's like heavy stuff. So it's a really serious offense to, how would you put it? To try to usurp the respect and honor that's due to one's superior. Those are the consequences, and those are some pretty serious consequences. Goes on. To be well versed in the transcendental science necessitates awareness of the techniques of spiritual science. Uddhava, being well aware of all these technicalities of transcendental science, advised Vidura to approach Maitreya Rishi to receive transcendental knowledge. So that's an interesting point there, that, Krishna consciousness, you got to know what you're doing. I don't know the Sanskrit, but there's this one verse about how devotional service is like a razor's edge, a sharpened razor's edge. When you're shaving with a sharp razor, you have to be attentive. If you're not attentive, you can cut yourself. You can make a bloody mess of your face, right? So you have to be careful. So in the same way, when you're talking about the science, the spiritual science, the techniques of spiritual science, when you're in Krishna consciousness, we're relating and dealing with very elevated personalities. It's like playing for high stakes, You can win a lot, but you can lose a lot. So it's always have to be conscientious. What that means is we have to study, we have to, read. Prabhupada gave us so many books, so much instruction like that, so we could be aware of that, the transcendental, the techniques of the spiritual science, and we wouldn't make mistakes that would be like cutting our own throat. So, reading on. It says here, Maitreya Rishi, let me read this. Uddhava, being well aware of these technicalities of the transcendental science, advised Vidura to approach Maitreya Rishi to receive transcendental knowledge. Vidura wanted to accept Uddhava as his spiritual master, but Uddhava did not accept the post because Vidura was as old as Uddhava's father, and therefore Uddhava could not accept him as his disciple. So that was one reason, the seniority by age, especially when Maitreya was present nearby, and there was another, in the understanding of Uddhava, equally qualified person nearby. The rule is that in the presence of a higher personality, one should not be very eager to impart instructions, even if one is competent and well-versed. You see, that's an etiquette. And it's a very important point. And here in the West, and I think as Kali Yuga progresses, particularly here in America, this particular understanding is being is fading into oblivion within human society. People are more or less adopting the philosophy of Jack's as good as his master. No, it doesn't work like that. It certainly doesn't work like that in Krishna consciousness. It doesn't work like that in life in general. That you really have to be there's a hierarchy within human society. We have to be conscious and careful about the social position of people that we're dealing with. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to associate much with Indian families, certainly higher class Indian families. They're very conscious of this. I remember being in situations where there was, Indian family, high successful people, and they're all professionals. The mother and the father and all the children are, they're doctors or software engineers. They're all accomplished. They're all successful, but they're very, very careful to show proper respect. The younger members of the family are very, very careful to show proper respect to their parents, to their aunts and uncles, etc. And in India, I don't know if people still do it, but it used to be it's a custom. Like when children, they would touch the feet of their parents in the morning when they first saw them. Actually, even older people would do that to their elders like that. So very much conscious of the importance of showing respect to superior personalities. And as I said, that's something which may have, to a certain extent, existed in Western culture at some point, but if it ever was present at all, it's certainly gradually or rapidly disappearing to the point where, in family situations, children call their parents by their first name. So many different things. There's so many different examples that could be given, but that's actually not the proper way, level of respect that should be shown. So it goes on here. Yes, so I'll read this sentence again because it's an important sentence. The rule is that in the presence of a higher personality, one should not be very eager to impart instructions, even if one is competent and well-versed. So Uddhava decided to send an elderly person like Vidura to Maitreya, another elderly person. But he was well-versed also because he was directly instructed by the Lord while he was about to quit this mortal world. So it's not like Uddhava was incapable or not qualified to instruct Vidura. Actually, he was, because he was instructed directly by Krishna himself before he left the world. But Uddhava was very careful to observe the etiquette, despite the fact that he himself was qualified by dint of having been directly instructed by Krishna. He was not prepared. He just felt, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to risk committing the offense of Maryada Vyatikrama and trying to instruct Vidura, who's older than me, my father's age, in the presence of Maitreya, who's also my father's age, and is basically, also qualified to instruct him. So that's a very important point. So it says, since both Uddhava and Maitreya were directly instructed by the Lord, both had the authority to become spiritual master of Vidura or anyone else, but Maitreya, being elderly, had the first claim to becoming the spiritual master, especially for Vidura, who was much older than Uddhava. And here now Prabhupada, the rest of this Prabhupada, he gives the general principle, okay, of how we should, understand this. One should not be very eager to become a spiritual master cheaply for the sake of profit and fame, but should become a spiritual master only for the service of the Lord. The Lord never tolerates the impertinence of Maryada Vyatikrama, so it's a very serious offense. One should never pass over the honor due to an elderly spiritual master in the interest of one's own personal gain and fame. Impertinence on the part of the pseudo-spiritual master is very risky to the progressive spiritual realization. So, as I started off by saying, I read this to give us some insight into the nature of this offense. And it's talking about this in relation to devotees, but it can be applied to the relationship between the spirit soul and Krishna too. In other words, one should not be eager to become, I was talking about ambition, a great devotee for the sake of profit and fame. Because Prabhupada was saying everybody should be eager, everybody should be ambitious how to become a great devotee. I read that, this from that room conversation, but not for the sake of profit and fame. You should try to become a great devotee for the service of the Lord. You see, not for the service of our subtle sense gratification. That's the pitfall. But that's the way to understand that. Because generally when we hear about ambition, we think, oh, no, it's okay, ambitious to become a great devotee, not for the service of the Lord, not for the service of our gross and subtle sense gratification. The Lord never tolerates the impertinence of Maryada Vyatikrama. So notice Krishna is not happy when people don't understand the philosophy and their position. I'll give an example in a second of this. One should never pass over the honor due to an elderly spiritual master. What to speak of an elderly spirit? One should never pass over the honor due to Krishna, in the interest of one's own personal gain and fame. Now, I have to say, I don't really know if that figured in there, this concept, this idea of us passing over the honor due to Krishna, and that contributed to our having to be removed from the spiritual world and come here to the material world. I'd have to do further research before I'd be prepared to suggest that possibly was part of our downfall, our demise. But certainly, if we could learn to avoid doing this, it certainly could be something helpful in helping us get out of this material world. And I'm not sure that I could say with confidence that it was something that contributed to our coming into this material world, but it's certainly something that if we understand and avoid doing, will help us get out of this material world. Not passing over the honor due to an elderly spiritual master or Krishna in the interest of one's personal gain and fame. So that's the problem. That's what there's a tendency to do that. And it's really kind of a simple thing to understand. And it's, it's very all pervasive. I remember as a kid growing up, we used to visit our other family members. And I was part of not a really big family, but, my mother was closely connected with her sisters. One of her sisters was married to a doctor, her older sister, married to a doctor, Uncle Lou. And he was kind of like the head of the family. He was a doctor, successful, and, it was clear he was the head of the family. He was he had the position of authority within the family. My father was an electrical engineer. He was like a manager in an electrical engineering company. So he was successful. But when we went there, when we all went to on holidays, we'd always go to Uncle Lou's house. He had a 9-room apartment near Fordham University in the Bronx. And, all the members of the family were, relatively successful, but Uncle Lou was the head of the family. And you had to, show special respect. You had to acknowledge that. And he sat at the head of the table, and he sort of he conducted whatever services we did from a Jewish background. So we had sometimes we'd go for the religious holidays and there'd be some sort of thing and he would conduct. And he basically, called the shots, and everybody had to just go along with that, was in compliance with that. And then things went smoothly and nicely, you see? So, but if somebody wasn't prepared to, if one of the family members, and I can't remember, to be honest with you, if anything like this happened, if it did, it would probably have been me that was guilty of doing it. If one of the family members neglected to show proper respect to the head of the family, or another member of the family that was superior to them in social position, that would not be appreciated. That would not be appreciated. And the consequence of that might be that, that family member would feel awkward and might not even get invited to, to come the next time there's some sort of family function like that. Probably, I would dare to say that many of you have experienced a similar sort of a thing, similar sort of social dynamics within your own personal lives, among your own family members. There's like a hierarchy. So anyway, the Krishna is at the top of the hierarchy. We're all part of it. We're actually the living entities, the spirit souls of Vibhinamsa. We're expansions of Krishna. We're a type of expansion of Krishna. Separated expansions. And so we're part of Krishna's spiritual family, and Krishna's the head of that family. And as the head of the family, he deserves, as its honor, respect, glorification, appreciation, etc. Our very existence, our lives, is like a gift from Krishna. The other day, I asked a devotee, I was just kind of being, facetious humor. I said to him, how much did your life cost? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, how much did you pay for it? And he goes, well, nothing. I said, exactly. It's a gift. Our life is a gift. And somebody might say, well, you could take it back. I mean, I'm not so happy with my life. But there's practically everybody kind of likes their life to a certain extent. I mean, it's very rare that you can meet somebody who, would agree to allow you to kill them because they were, so dissatisfied with their life, they'd rather not be alive. No, so it's a gift. That's the real point I'm trying to make. And we should appreciate who that gift is coming from. That gift is from Krishna. So, yeah. So we have to be, very important point, to be, to cultivate this mentality, a consciousness of appreciation, respect, as I said, glorification, praising, extolling, like that. These are things that we're meant to be doing as spirit souls and as devotees of Krishna. And actually, if you analyze what Prabhupada gave us, our devotional service, that's built in to what Prabhupada has given us. The morning program, for instance, what do? We get up early in the morning before the Lord rises. We attend Mangal Arati, and in Mangal Arati, we're singing a song, the Guru Vastika. It's 8 stanzas in praise and glorification of the spiritual master. And it's like it's meant to, and we're doing it every day. It's meant to train us to be thinking like that, to have that mentality of appreciating, acknowledging the superior position of the spiritual master, and appreciating his contribution, appreciating what he's done for us, etc., like that. And then, as if that's not enough to do it once, we actually do it twice, because it's kind of like we have 2 Guru Pujas in the morning. Mangal Arati is technically a Guru Puja, because we're singing that song. It's in glorification of the spiritual master. And then 2 hours or 3 hours later, we have what we officially call Guru Puja, and we're singing another song, Shri Guru Vandana by Narottam Das Thakur, which is another song in glorification of the spiritual master. So it must be something that, the Prabhupada and the Acharyas thought was really important to kind of ingrain within our brains there, because they got us, doing something that's meant to help us develop that mentality twice every morning. So pretty significant. Another point is that another way to acknowledge and honor Prabhupada is reading his books. Prabhupada put a lot of work into his books, and so it's kind of like he wanted his followers, he wanted his disciples and grand disciples to read his books. It's really that simple, because he put so much work into them. And actually there's different statements, all to the effect of it. Prabhupada said, the best of me is in my books. If people really want to know me, they should read my books, etc. Things of that nature. So anyway, I had an interesting experience, which helped me get further realization, I guess you could say, of the importance of that. Last week I went on a trip to San Antonio, Texas, with a godbrother of mine, Archita Das. He's the president of the BBT, either the BBT International or the BBT, I'm not sure which, but anyway. So it was for the AAR, American Academy of Religions. It's a conference that happens annually, and devotees have been going, the BBTs have been going there for, I don't know, forever, basically. That's as long as I've been here in Los Angeles, we've been attending that. And generally it's pretty well attended. There's, people that come from all over the country for it, or even all over the world. Religious scholars, professors, and a lot of publishers come and they display their books of, and of that nature, and hoping that the professors will come and take them in order, for their courses or whatever. This year, I would say for some reason, but I know the reason, probably is because of COVID, it was very poorly attended. There was less than 10% of the normal attendance. So we were part of it. Like, there's two aspects of it. One is a trade show aspect. There's a big hall where all the publishers set up their books. And then there's an attendee, or how would you say it? Another place in the same convention center where there's people are delivering papers, different professors or famous religions are delivering papers, and people are there just hearing their lecture. And then during the sessions break, they come down to the hall there, and they kind of walk around and check out the trade show aspect of it. So anyway, so as I said, there's less than 10% of the people there. So it was very difficult. I mean, we were basically, confronted with sitting around twiddling our thumbs, or, the people were walking around with just people from other booths, other publishers walking around to check out what the other publishers were doing. There's hardly anybody coming down for the, from the lectures or anything like that. So anyway, at one point I got really frustrated. I had all my rounds chanted. We were staying in like a motel that was provided for us by one very kind and generous member of the devotional community there in San Antonio. And so I got there and I had all my rounds chanted. There were no people. So I was having problems with my battery on my phone, so I had to have it on to charge. So I just went outside. I was walking around. It was pretty early in the day at that point. Maybe it was like, I don't know, 10 o'clock or so, whatever. And maybe a little later. And I was walking around, and I didn't have my beads because I finished my rounds. That was a mistake. I should have took my beads with me. And I didn't have my phone, and I didn't take a book because I usually read off my phone when I'm walking around. So I just was like there, and my mind was kind of getting the better of me. And I was really like getting on the mental platform because I didn't have engagement. I had all my rounds chanted, and there I was out there with I came out there to try to distribute sets of books to these professors or whatever, whoever people were attending this conference, and they weren't there. So anyway, so I started praying really hard to Krishna. And then I remembered something in the Caitanya Charitamrita that I've just read recently. It was a passage from I can't remember, it's in the Madhya Lila, but it was that section about where Lord Caitanya rescues Krishnadas from the Bhattataris. They were touring. Krishnadas was Lord Chaitanya's servant on his tour of South India. And he was described as a humble and gentle Brahmin. In other words, he wasn't just some fool or anything like that. He was a Brahmin. And even as a Brahmin, he seemed like, he had those two good qualities. He was humble, he was gentle. But he was he wasn't conscientious enough because he got allured by women who were part of the camp of the Bhattataris. The Bhattataris were like sort of a nomadic gypsy kind of people. And the men in that group, they would dress like sannyasis and imitate sannyasis, but their real business was just sense gratification, kidnapping people, and then basically enslaving them as part of their group. And anyway, somehow or another, what happened was, in his innocent, naive way, Krishnadas was lured by some of the Bhattatari women, and he went to their camp early in the morning, to associate with them, and he would have gotten kidnapped and captured by them and not allowed to leave their association. They just kind of use him as a slave, basically. Lord Chaitanya came and rescued him. And the story is interesting. When Lord Chaitanya got there, he said, "I'm a sannyasi, you're a sannyasi. Why are you giving me trouble? We're all sannyasis. Why are you trying to give me trouble by taking my servant here?" And they got very angry right away. They didn't, try to have a verbal argument with him. They went for weapons. And they went to, take their weapons and kind of use them on Lord Chaitanya. And something happened, something like supernatural, mystical happened, and the weapons kind of came back on themselves somehow. It doesn't give much description of exactly in what way that happened. But then Lord Chaitanya took the opportunity of the mayhem, so to speak, to just grab Krishnadas by the hair and drag him out of there and, beat it, so to speak. And he kept him with him the whole rest of the tour, through South India. Then when he got to Jagannath Puri, he when he was talking with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he called for Krishnadas and he said, this, just see the character of this man. He was, with me as my servant, and he became distracted, etc. And now I'm releasing him. I have nothing further to do with him. I have no further responsibility. And that was that. And Lord Chaitanya took a very firm, hard stand on that. And Krishnadas, of course, was very distraught upon hearing that. He, started weeping, and the other devotees felt sympathetic for him, and they decided towards, they would try to help him. So they arranged for him to have another service. They arranged, and they actually got it authorized in a very clever sort of a way by Lord Chaitanya. They approached Lord Chaitanya and said, I think we need somebody to go to Navadvip and give the news of your return to Jagannath Puri. Is that okay? And Lord Chaitanya says, yeah, he knew what was up, but he said, yeah, sure. Just do what you want, whatever you decide is okay by me. So they selected Krishnadas, and in this way he was engaged in, the service, like devotional service again. So, but anyway, in the purport, Prabhupada says that from this we can understand that the devotees of the Lord are more merciful than the Lord himself. And then further in the purport, down a couple sentences later, he says, sometimes the Lord might be hard, like in the case of Krishnadas, where even another, maybe even more extreme example of that is Junior Haridas. But so sometimes the Lord can be hard, but the devotees are always kind. So I remembered that. And I started thinking, you know what? I should pray to Prabhupada. That's probably a better program. So I started praying to Prabhupada. And then after doing that for a minute or two, I realized, this is what I'm just praying to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, I'm praying to Prabhupada for his mercy, but his mercy is right in there in that hall. I mean, I've got all his books right there. I mean, maybe this is not a good opportunity to distribute books, but I have to learn how to turn lemons into lemonade. I have to see this as an opportunity to read Prabhupada's books. So I thought, okay, that changed my whole perspective. So I went back in there and I picked up the Caitanya chart and read it where I have been reading recently, and I read for a few hours, and that was good. I made the best use of a bad bargain. And then I got a phone call from one of the devotees in San Antonio who was hosting us, who's partially responsible for our accommodation and making, supplying us prasadam. And they said, hey, we're doing a program here at our home and we have guests here. Can you come? I said, I don't think I can. I'm supposed to be, I have to stay here and help Archita. So I kind of, and he was going, oh, please come. I said, well, I don't know. It's already, we're not hardly doing anything. I can't bail out on him. But then, so we left it at that. But after I got off the phone, I thought to myself, wait a second, stay here and do what? There's nobody here to try to engage. So I rang him back and I said, after about 20 minutes, I rang him back and said, hey, first I talked to Archit about it. I said, I think I should go. He said, what? They have a program when I said, nothing's happening here. Like this is, what's the point? So he agreed. And I rang him back and I said, are the guests still there? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I'm coming. He said, oh, great. So I hopped in the car, drove to where he was. And as soon as I got there, I gave a class to the guests that were there. And after the class, I told them about what we were trying to do, why we come to San Antonio, and how we were trying to distribute sets of books to these professors or wherever the people who attend this conference. And we had a special offer for the show, discounted price to make it easily available for everybody. And we could offer the same thing to them. Anyway, about 6 people took sets of books, which I thought was pretty far out. And it really, it gave me a bunch of realizations. One realization was that Sankirtan's amazing. Sankirtan's amazing. It's not under the auspices of the external energy. It's not an activity of the material world. There's one, I'll find it really quickly. There's one purport, it's chapter 6, text 3 in the Bhagavad-gita, where Prabhupada says, he's talking about yoga in general, and he says, the process of linking oneself with the Supreme is called yoga. It may be compared to a ladder for attaining the topmost spiritual realization. This next sentence is the one I'm thinking of. This latter begins from the lowest material condition of the living entity and rises up to perfect self-realization and pure spiritual life. Okay. Well, I felt like that happened in one day. That's the potency of Sankirtan, that in one day, I felt like I was elevated from the lowest, as Prabhupada put it, the lowest material condition of the living entity. Because that's how I felt when I went out there, at the beginning of the day, when I didn't have the book, I didn't have my beads, I just totally, on the mental platform. But then I took shelter, I guess, by Krishna's mercy. I made the right decisions to, first to take shelter of Krishna, praying to him, praying to Prabhupada, going in and taking shelter of Prabhupada's books, and then taking shelter of the opportunity to do some service, to preach and distribute some of Prabhupada's books. And I feel like, in one day, I got elevated from the lowest material condition of the living entity up to, maybe not perfect, of course, but, some sort of way more elevated spiritual consciousness than what I was in earlier in the day. So that's the power of, that was one realization I had, the power of Sankirtan. Because this purport of today's purport is talking about Sankirtan, talks about how different types of juggas, right? Getting back to today's verse, are difficult in this age, but the Sankirtan jugga is very suitable. And let's see exactly what Prabhupada says here, today's purport. In the age of Kali, the Sankirtan jugga, in this purport is talking about the chanting of the holy names of God, but distributing Prabhupada's books is also Sankirtan jugga. And the marathon's coming up, so I thought it was appropriate to talk about this a little bit. It's recommended by the Vedic scriptures, and this transcendental system was introduced by Lord Caitanya for the deliverance of all men in this age. Sankirtan jugga and Krishna consciousness go well together. Lord Krishna in his devotional form as Lord Chaitanya is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam as follows, and then the famous verse is quoted, Krishna Varnam Tusa Krishna. And then Prabhupada goes on to say, other juggas prescribed in the Vedic literatures are not easy to perform in this age of Kali, but the Sankirtan jugga is easy and sublime for all purposes and very powerful. You see? So that's another way in which we can acknowledge and honor and respect Prabhupada is, of course, doing these, the sadhana that we've been given of going to the morning program, chanting the Guru Vastakam prayers and the Sri Guru Vandana prayer and reading Prabhupada's books, and also then trying to distribute Prabhupada's books. It's all ways in which we can honor and acknowledge the exalted position of our spiritual master and ultimately of Lord Chaitanya. And as I said, it's if when you do it, it's an amazingly powerful activity. I know that was not, actually a similar sort of thing happened the next day, because that was Sunday and we still had Monday to do. So, there was no Sunday program on Monday. So I went back the next day to the hall and the same sort of thing again. We got there at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's there. Nobody was going to be there all day because the people just didn't show up. The attendance was way down. So I thought, well, now what? And Archita made a comment to me. I think he was kind of like, not full serious, but almost in like frustration. He said, boy, you'd probably do more if you just took these books and went out on the street and sold them. And I said, you know what? I just took that as coming from Super Soul. I said, you know what? You're probably right. Is that okay? And he said, well, yeah. So I took, not the sets, we had 2 sets on display, a set of Bhagavatams and a set of Chaitanya Charitamritas. But we had a lot of other books like hardcover Bhagavad-gita, softcover Bhagavad-gita, and a bunch of, assorted miscellaneous titles. So I just made up like 2 big boxes, 2 like hardcover Bhagavad-gita boxes worth of books, as much as I could carry. We didn't have a trolley or anything like that. I just packed them up full, grabbed them and headed out. Went out on the street, went on to Alamo and Commerce Street, right by the Alamo. And I just started stopping people on the street. And by Krishna's mercy, I was able to distribute all the books. That kind of felt pretty good. So, so another realization I got was, aside from how powerful an activity Sankirtan is in elevating your consciousness from a very bad consciousness, a very material consciousness, to a very, wonderful, enlivened spiritual consciousness. It's also don't give up. Krishna tests us. Krishna appreciates us making that effort to distribute the books. He appreciates it's a sacrifice. It's called Sankirtan Yajna. So he appreciates that yajna and he reciprocates by empowering us to do it successfully. And this is stated, I probably shared this quote with all of you before, but it's very brief, and I'll just read it again here. Yeah, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 29, Text 46, Prabhupada says, a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always thinking of how fallen conditioned souls can be delivered. Now, you might immediately think, well, I'm not a pure devotee, so this doesn't apply to me. But it's not black and white, okay? I mean, sure, it perfectly applies to a pure devotee, but, Krishna's reciprocating with the sincerity. And I think we can broaden out this understanding here to that. So it says here, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, influenced by the merciful devotees, even if you're not a pure devotee, Krishna is influenced by the merciful devotees' attempt to deliver fallen souls. That's the point. That's the point. Pure devotee or otherwise, Krishna is influenced by the merciful devotees' attempt to deliver fallen souls. And it goes on to say, and he enlightens the people in general from within by his causeless mercy. See? So that's how Sankirtan works. That's what's going on out there. As devotees, we have to try to be merciful. Even if you don't feel merciful, it's okay. Engage in the merciful activity of trying to give other people Krishna consciousness by giving them Srila Prabhupada's books. Even if you're not feeling merciful, just do it as a regulative principle. Just like you might not, I don't hardly ever feel like chanting my rounds, but I always chant them. You follow what I'm saying? Sometimes you might be getting a taste for chanting, but even if you're not getting a taste for chanting, you got to chant because that's our duty. So as a matter of duty, we should try to engage in the merciful activity of trying to deliver the fallen souls by giving them Srila Prabhupada's books. And the result will be, Krishna's influenced by that attempt. He says he's influenced by the merciful devotee's attempt to deliver the fallen souls. In other words, he's pleased by that. He's pleased by that. And the reciprocation is he enlightens the people in general from within by his causeless mercy. In the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, Tesham eva anakam partam agyamajana jam tamahan nashyamyat babavashto gyana depena bashvata. Out of compassion for them, I am dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. See, so when Krishna is pleased with a devotee or a non-devotee or whatever, he destroys with a shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. In other words, it's just another way of saying he enlightens the people in general from within by his causeless mercy. Okay? And even Prabhupada felt that he was also part of that whole experience. I'll read you. I'm reading from this book called The Nectar of Book Distribution, which was compiled maybe 20, 25 years ago, maybe 30 years, I don't know. But the very last passage in the book, it's the concluding words. So it's obvious that the editors must have thought it was pretty significant as well, because they put it as the concluding words of the whole book. This is an excerpt from a letter Prabhupada wrote to, I believe it was Sudama in 1972, where he shares his understanding of how, he became successful in spreading Krishna consciousness in the West. And he goes on to say here, when I was alone in your New York, I was thinking, who will listen to me in this horrible, sinful place? All right, I shall stay a little longer. At least I can distribute a few of my books. That is something. But Krishna was all along preparing something I could not see. And he brought you to me one by one, sincere American boys and girls, to be trained up for doing the work of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. See, so in other words, Prabhupada, he qualified here. He was doing what he himself talked about in his purport there in the 4th canto. He was attempting to deliver the fallen souls And what we're hearing Prabhupada talk about here is how Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, became influenced by Prabhupada's merciful attempt to deliver the fallen souls. And what happened was Krishna brought one by one sincere American boys and girls to him to be trained up for doing the work of Lord Caitanya. And and what does Prabhupada say about that? He says, now I can see that it is a miracle. That's a real significant miracle in the world. That Prabhupada says, now I can see that it was a miracle that this happened. He goes, otherwise, your city of New York, one single old man with only a few books to sell for barely getting edibles, how can he survive? What to speak of introducing a God-conscious movement for saving humankind? That is Krishna's miracle. Yes, I agree. Of course I agree, Prabhupada says. He's my spiritual master. But what brought on that miracle? You see? Yeah, it was. Prabhupada saying, now I can see it's a miracle. That was Krishna's miracle. What brought on that miracle? Well, we heard about it. What brought on that miracle was what we heard about in the previous purport, was the merciful devotees' attempt to deliver the fallen souls. That resulted in the miracle of Krishna sending to Prabhupada young American boys and girls to be trained up for doing the work of Lord Caitanya. You see? So that's a really important thing to remember. If we meditate, remember that, we can keep from being discouraged, because any sincere devotee, I won't say anybody, any sincere devotee can be successful if they in their preaching, if they try. It was in 1975 in Atlanta. Prabhupada once he was meeting with the airport distributors, and the leader was Tripurari. I can't remember if he was a Swami at that point or not. I can't remember. But he was the leader, and he was the spokesman for the group. So he was talking with Prabhupada. At one point he said to Prabhupada, sometimes when we go to the temples, they ask us to give classes on book distribution technique. And Prabhupada said, well, kind of interrupted him and said, well, what do you tell them? And he said, well, we tell them first, they have to chant their rounds, follow the regular principles, read the books. And then Prabhupada interrupted him again. He said, yes, that is our only technique to become very devout followers of the rules and regulations. See, so that's the potency. It's just like in philosophy, they have what they call the immediate cause and the remote cause. So the immediate cause, of being successful in Sankirtan might be, you go out there, you work very hard, you're very enthusiastic, you're a very clever salesperson. Okay, that's fair as part of the cause. But the real cause, the remote cause, or the real cause is the spiritual potency. Is the Daivim Prakritim Ashrita getting involved. You see? In the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, Mahatmanas Tumam Parta Daivim Prakritim Ashrita. That devotional service is under the control of the auspices of the internal potency of the Lord, which is Radharani personified. So when you're engaging in Sankirtan, trying to preach, you're entering into a relationship with the internal potency of the Lord. And that's the real thing. That's the real potent factor. That's what's really making things happen. I actually, to be honest with you, even just yesterday, I got a vivid example of that, vivid experience of that. I was distributing books up at the Griffith Observatory. We set up a table up there. And it was a little bit different than at a school. At a school, hang on a sec. At a school, you can maybe get experience the illusion that you're the doer, because students are very simple, they're very innocent. And, with practice, you could kind of learn how to, manipulate them a little bit. And you can maybe start thinking, well, I'm the doer because I'm clever and how I'm doing. But not at the observatory, it's all adults, basically. And they're moving fast. They're not simple, innocent 18, 19, and 20-year-old kids. So you're very much kind of like at the mercy of the Lord. And that, we were at the table there, we had all the books set up, but the people, getting right to the point, the people I was trying to stop, for the most part, weren't stopping. I mean, I was, using my lines, my so-called expert sales techniques to stop everybody, but they weren't stopping. But meantime, during the time when I was just sometimes just standing there, people would walk up to the table, and they would be the people who take the books and give nice donations. You see? So I realized I'm not the doer. I'm not the doer. It worked out. We had a very good day, but I simultaneously got the clear realization that this has been very good. We got a lot of mercy out here today. We got a lot of nice donations, but they just came kind of out of the clear blue sky. It wasn't because of my so-called slick New York used car salesman techniques or anything like that. It was just the mercy, Prabhupada's mercy and the mercy of the parampara, etc. I could really feel that. And so, we're not the doers. We just have to take shelter of, the internal energy of the Lord. And that's done by, just as I said, being a sincere devotee, chanting 16 rounds, following the 4 good principles, attending the program, reading Prabhupada's books, and just going out and trying hard and not giving up. And then Krishna, as we read, and as I mentioned several times now, Krishna being influenced by the devotees' attempt to deliver the fallen souls, he enlightens the people in general from within by his causes of mercy. Krishna will inspire people to come and take those books and give donations. That's how it works. It's not a material thing. There's no material formula. It's spiritual. Any devotee who's prepared to try to be a serious devotee and prepared to go out there and do the work of trying to distribute Prabhupada's books, and be patient. You got to it might not happen like in the first 25 minutes you're out there or something like that, but Krishna will reciprocate. Krishna will, as stated there, he will be merciful and empower you to distribute the books. So I think that's pretty much 3:38. I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add or any question they'd like to ask?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can you hear me, Bhagavad-gita Prabhu?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, Chai. That's very, very interesting talk you gave. Thank you. I was thinking about, for non-devotees, for whatever they accomplish or fail to accomplish, they're not the doer either, just as the devotee is not the doer. Because you were talking a lot about this lesson that the devotee can learn from especially through the service that you have a lot of experience in book distribution. The devotee can learn how, by Krishna's mercy, the devotee can learn how the devotee is not causing this successful book distribution, what Krishna is. And you gave that very clear example of you'd be going up to person after person after person, and they wouldn't be taking the books in a particular situation. But then they would come up to your table without you trying to approach them first, and then they would be taking the books. And that was showing. So you learn. So that was sort of a clear example for you about Krishna was saying, hey, I'm orchestrating everything.
Right.
So for the non-devotee, I mean, it's really the same thing is true, but why is it? So how is it though that it seems like it's Krishna's special mercy on the devotee that Krishna reveals that to the devotee, whereas for the non-devotee, although Krishna's in charge of the success or failures of a non-devotee's endeavors, the non-devotee usually does not get that realization. And so I was just wondering if you have any thoughts about how it is that Krishna leaves the non-devotee in the dark, or perhaps it's Krishna allows the non-devotee to stay in the dark. Now, of course, there are exceptions, right? I mean, sometimes non-devotees, they realize it, like they thought they're on top of the world, and then, the carpet gets pulled out from right under them, and then they realize, oh, I thought I had it together and I don't. But typically non-devotees don't get that realization that Krishna's in charge. After all, they're non-devotees. Well, by definition of a non-devotee, they don't have devotion for Krishna. They don't recognize how Krishna is in charge. So anyway, those are just some, I was just wondering if you had some thoughts about this.
Well, here's a hypothetical situation to try to kind of address that. Just like, very hypothetically speaking, in the case of the United States government, let's say, for argument's sake, they're trying to elevate all the citizens. Some citizens are law-abiding citizens, so they will go about elevating the law-abiding citizens, the citizens who are cooperating, who are compliant. They'll have a particular program for elevating them, right? But then there is a certain sections of citizens who are not law-abiding, who are not cooperative, who are not compliant. They're the opposite. They're rebellious, defiant, etc. Now they also want to elevate them, but the way they're elevating them is they apprehend them, they're putting them in prison, and they punish them. Now the motivation behind that is it's not sadistic. It's not like we want to see these guys, we want to hurt these guys. No, ultimately we're trying to elevate them too, but because of the way they are, this is the first step in elevating them. We got to punish them. We got to slap them around a little bit because so that they'll realize that they're just way off the mark. They're just, they're heading in the wrong direction. This is something I found earlier today. I think it's from a book called Renunciation Through Wisdom and Knowledge or something like that. Anyway, I found this passage in there. The foolish karmi cannot comprehend that because he has forgotten Lord Krishna and is trying to usurp his position, the Lord's external potency, Maya, has tied a noose around his neck with the rope of the three modes of material nature and is making him suffer excruciating pains. See? So in other words, because they're trying to usurp Krishna's position. So this is how they get dealt with. The result of that is just what you just heard. Maya ties a noose around their neck of the ropes with the rope of the three modes of material nature and is making them suffer excruciating pains. Although all of his activities, the conditioned soul, are within the grip of the three modes of material nature and orchestrated by Maya, still, the grossly foolish karmi believes that he is the master of his situation. Thus, he busies himself with trying to make better arrangements for living in the world of duality. So they're being punished. They have to give up. Person has to give up that mentality of trying to usurp Krishna's position. They have to start. They have to have the good fortune of coming in contact with a devotee. They need some help from the super soul. Actually, I'll read you something else here. Definitely, at some point, they need to get the association of the devotee. But prior to that, this is an excerpt from a morning walk conversation. Oh, hang on, wrong place. Oh, wait. Okay, yeah, this is a morning walk conversation. It took place in, I think it was Mayapur. But anyway, so, normal, ordinary, usual scenario, situation. Prabhupada's walking, some sannyasi disciples with him. Vridananda Maharaj was there, Guru Kripa Maharaj, Jai Pataka Maharaj, Jai Veda Maharaj, like that. Okay, so at one point, Guru Kripa says to Prabhupada, I've heard that the spirit soul is like an atom, but it's in the body of an atom, because and Prabhupada explained to him, made a distinction between a material atom and a spiritual atom, and that the spiritual atom, the spirit soul, sometimes takes the body of a material atom. And it has that's a body, the material atom. Anyway, so at some point, Guru Kripa goes, let me get the whole thing for you. Okay, he says, after he accepts the point that, okay, that the spirit soul is within the atom, so Guru Kripa goes, if we say that Krishna enters even within the atom, what is his business there? Prabhupada says, business is to guide the rascals like you. Laughter. Do you follow or not? Prabhupada says, because Krishna loves you so much that he loves you so much that even you accept this material atom, he goes to help you. Therefore, he is within. Because Sarvasya Chahamriti Sani Vishto. See, so in other words, there's always hope, but because there's always a little bit of, at least certainly when the living entity comes to, spirit soul comes to the human form of life, okay, they might have that, consciousness to usurp Krishna's position, but at the same time, Krishna, a super soul, from what I can understand from this, is within their heart, and he's trying to guide them. Here he goes. Oh, here it goes. He says, this is what Krishna, Prabhupada quotes that verse from the 15th chapter, Mataksmati Jnanam Aponamsha, and then he kind of elaborates upon that. He gives some, he explains what that means. He says, he started the quote, and Ridan Namaraj came and supplied the rest of the verse. Then Prabhupada goes, Mataksmati Jnanam. He's always trying. Quote now, you rascal, why are you suffering in this way? Come back home. End quote. This is the answer. He's so kind. That is his kindness. So in other words, despite the fact that the living entity is trying to usurp Krishna's position and live in rebellion or defiance to his will, Krishna is trying to discourage him from that. Krishna's a super soul from within the heart is trying to discourage him from being like that. And when some soul becomes a little bit receptive to that, Krishna from within his heart trying to direct him, then he's allowed to come in contact with a bona fide spiritual master. There's that verse, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagavanji Guru Krishna Prashade Bhai Bhakta Vicha. That, so Krishna will direct him to come in contact with the spiritual master. And then, by the mercy of the spiritual master, the direction of the spiritual master, and if he takes up the process of devotional service, he'll eventually get Krishna. So anyway, so the short answer is they're being punished. They're not being guided by the internal energy, whereas a devotee is. Whereas a non-devotee, while they are committed to that non-devotional way of thinking, they're not. They're under the Prakrite Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha Ahankara Munatma Kartamiti Manishta. The bewildered spirit soul, they're under the influence of the three modes of material nature. And so, they don't get the same kind of understanding that the devotee does from when certain things are happening. Does that sort of answer it a little bit, or I don't know?
Yeah. Again, it's very interesting because it's a very interesting topic, I would say, because just talking about it philosophically, if one is interested in hearing about it, you can really learn a lot, and it's really fascinating because the idea that we're not the doer, it's actually a very elevated, one has to have a very elevated position to actually understand that, and yet we can, it seems so like it's a simple concept, but it's so hard to understand, and most people don't, and even as for junior devotees, like they don't understand that, otherwise they wouldn't be junior devotees anymore. So it's very interesting. So, but yeah, thank you very much for your Bhagavad-gita.
When I was standing there at the table yesterday up at the observatory, I had this picture on the table. I probably showed everybody this before. It's a picture of the six Goswamis with a verse from the Ancha-lila. It's text 3 and 4. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, I pray to the lotus feet of the six Goswamis. I think he says the names there. Yeah, namely Shri Rupa Goswami, Sanat Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Shri Jiva Goswami, Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So that all my attempts, all my impediments in writing this literature will be annihilated and my real desire will be fulfilled. And at the end of the purport there, Prabhupada says, if we adhere to the lotus feet of the six Goswamis and pray for their mercy, all impediments will be annihilated and the transcendental devotional desire to serve the Supreme Lord will be fulfilled. So at one point, I have it on the table there and I was standing there and I was thinking, I'm trying to do, I'm exerting so much energy to stop these people, saying things like, hey, you guys look like an awesome couple, or sir, I'm not sure about this, but I think we got the same hairstyle. If the guy's bald, I'll pull off my hat and show him I got a shaved head. Just all these different things. But at some point I thought to myself, you know what, I think a better utilization of my energy would be to just maybe pray more to the six Goswamis. And in other words, I got that, I think is a realization that Krishna's doing it. It's not my efforts. I mean, that is part of it in the sense that it's part of the it's part of surrendering. That we're like Arjuna, he had to fight. So externally he was fighting, but internally I'm sure he was like very Krishna conscious at the same time. Both things have to be there. The external attempt to successfully execute the activity, but more important than that is the internal absorption in the philosophy, the understanding of how things are really working. And that's why we have the morning program. That's what separates us from an ordinary karmi salesman. They're just going out there and, on the strength of their own prowess, trying to get results. But devotees, we're taking shelter of the internal energy from, the time we wake up in the morning till the time we go out there, prayers to chanting Hare Krishna mantra. Oh my Lord, please engage me in your service. And, praying in so many different ways to Krishna to use this as his instrument. And we get, we get spiritual potency from doing that. And then of course, when we get out there, we also make the external attempt. But the attempt to do that without that internal absorption, I don't think that's going to be very successful. But the better program is to be very internally absorbed and simultaneously make that external effort. But of the two things, what's by far more important is the internal absorption, the surrender to the philosophy like that. What's that verse in the Bhagavad-gita? Krishna says, all activities just depend upon me and act fully under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. And then he goes in the next verse, he says, if you are conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. But if you don't, then that's what we're that's what we're looking for. That's what we're hoping will happen. That, we'll be conscious of Krishna by performing those activities of chanting our rounds, following the regulative principles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by his grace. Same thing as I read in that last sentence of the purport. And if we don't do that, then Krishna says, but if you don't do that, if you don't hear me and act through false ego, you'll be lost. You'll be in material consciousness. You'll just, be bewildered. It just won't work, won't happen. Anyway.
Yeah. Prabhu, I was thinking when I was in Japan, distributing books in some underground like shopping mall or something, or a train station. I forget. It was like the shopping malls, the train stations. They would sort of be coordinated. But I remember being in this underground place, and couldn't speak Japanese except for I had 5 or 10 lines memorized, and I was quite good at repeating them, but and I remember I would meeting people and I would have to face all their doubts and resistance, and it was like I'm thinking back now, so like all the resistance that I would face with person after person down there, it was really a reflection of my own my own attachments to things of this material world. So so Krishna was testing me, how much did I believe that this person I'm talking to is a spirit soul and devotee of Krishna, or how much am I going to believe the things that he's telling me or she's telling me, the way that they're expressing doubts and resisting what I'm saying. Am I going to believe in that, which is a reflection of my own attachments, or am I going to believe something beyond their gut instinct response to what I'm saying? And so it'd be like testing person after person. And it was so, I remember that day, it was so challenging, it was so hard. But it was sort of like, as I was going through the motions, trying to get through to these people, it was really, as I was doing that, it was exactly the same as my trying to go deep into myself and get close, realize my own relationship with Krishna. And it was quite challenging that day. It was sort of like beating, attacking all my attachments. They were all having to be, and facing them, and some of them getting knocked off, and then there's more, and it's like, and I remember at one point, then I just I felt like, oh, I don't know what to do anymore. It's like, oh gosh, this is so hard. But I was trying still. And then I remember I just basically at one point, I just saw like Lord Vishnu everywhere, like in the person I was talking to, down the hall, at a person over there. It was like I saw Vishnu in their heart, and everywhere I was going, it was just like a Lord Vishnu was there. Like I couldn't escape the reality, my reality at that time. It was that Lord Vishnu is, everything comes from Lord Vishnu, everything's part of Lord Vishnu, Lord Vishnu is in charge. Ultimately, the absolute truth, it's Lord Vishnu. And I just had that realization. I was like, and then I was happy, like, I had achieved shelter then. And because I was, though, fighting so hard, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is amazing, because that's what, like, if I was having a conversation with someone without their understanding the context of this battle I was facing at the time, then it'd be like, wow, this is so mystical. You get to see Lord Vishnu. But instead, it was not at all. It was more like I was like sort of being forced to peel off one piece of my impure existence after another. And then finally I got, like, Lord Vishnu showed me for a moment, what's really there ultimately behind all of this. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, like at this point I was like, yeah, I mean, I know this, that's true. It wasn't like, wow, oh my God, because I wasn't really able to kind of think for myself anymore. I was so dependent on Krishna at that point, and all my abilities to try to think and figure things out on my own. I realized how it was all just so futile. Krishna had taken it away from me, smacked me down, kind of. So it's kind of interesting. But anyway, that's an experience of realizing how through the great service of book distribution or preaching, that's how on that day I got a good realization of how I'm not the doer, but it's just for that day. I wish I really got the point that the Lord was trying to convey to me. But at least that day I did.
That's great. Something's better than nothing, right?
Yeah. I think if you're speaking, Bhagavati, you're muted there.
Okay, that should be better, right? Can you hear
Yep,
me?
now I can hear you.
Yeah, anybody else have anything they'd like to say or anything they'd like to ask or? Okay, should we do a kirtan and then wrap it up?
That'd be great, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, yep. Okay. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Charine Nirvashesha Sunyavari Paschadesha Tarine Jaya Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Oh, Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo.
Haribo. Thank you very much, Bhrgupati Prabhu. You have amazing realizations and amazing devotion to Krishna and the devotees. So your association is very inspiring.
Thank you.
I hope you don't mind that our group was about as small as our group has been on any Saturday over the last 2 years, but maybe it's something to do with the holiday weekend. But for me, it was as wonderful or more wonderful than if there were 10 times this number of people, because it was just the very special, connection we got to have with Krishna through listening to you. So I'm very grateful, and I hope you were satisfied despite the small group.
Yep, no problem. No problem. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I appreciate that. I like that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Uh,
Thank you. Thank you very much. I got that verse, the Srimad Bhagavatam verse 3:426 is very good that you referenced that. I will go back and read it again. It's really interesting to me. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So I think that I don't know what your schedule is like, but probably for the for the month of December, I'll be busy with the marathon and all. But after that, I'll be open again if you want to.
Okay. Yeah.